to the shadow.
Hello dear fans, as y'all already know, today we're here talking about Gandalf the Grey, or as the good folk of the Shire call him, a disturber of the peace. But before we move on to the power set, anatomy, and more of the Grey Wizard, known to the Dwaro as Tharkun, or the Staff Man, we just wanted to remind you to subscribe for more Tolkien content. Now it's time to take up our staff and go on an adventure, or adventures, with the Maiar known as Olorin. Yes, that was Gandalf's name before the Great Music. What's the Great Music? And why does Gandalf have so many names? Let's dive right in. Before we go to our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. Gandalf before Sauron. The Maiar are angelic beings created by Eru to aid the Valar. Gandalf was one such Maiar who worked under Manwë, Varda, Irmo, and Nienna. While he was associated with Varda's fire, he learned pity from Nienna, which made him favor her methods when he walked disguised among the elves, and instilled positive thoughts in their hearts. Then, he was nominated to be part of the Istari, or the Wizards, who would go forth to Middle-earth and secure it against the fallen Maiar Sauron, who served Melkor, and after his master's fall, had become the reigning Dark Lord in Arda. After his defeat, Sauron's One Ring remained, making the Valar think the entity would return. But does that mean Gandalf the Grey, the old man Bilbo Baggins remembered for his amazing fireworks at Old Took's birthdays, is only a wizard? Let's open our spellbooks and check, shall we? Professor Gandalf's Adventures in Wizardry. Yes, Gandalf is really one of the Istari, or the Wizards. While originally he was meant to be the third in their group, Nienna recommended that he be the second most powerful instead in their fight against Sauron. At first, Olorin was hesitant to embark to Middle-earth, citing fear of Sauron. Yes, the same Gandalf whom we see as a wise and fearless leader once feared Sauron. Eventually, of course, he was convinced of his power and left for Middle-earth. But what did he look like? Now, if you're a fan, you might think of one of the various actors who has played or voiced the character. But book fans know how the professor himself wanted Gandalf to look, shall we? What does Gandalf look like? In the books, Gandalf is described as having a giant white beard, a blue, yes, blue hat, and a staff. He also wears gray robes until his transformation into Gandalf the White in the Two Towers. He accessorizes this fit with a silver scarf to complete the look of the old wizard, whom the people of the Shire love to gossip about after he stole Mad Baggins away on an adventure. As for Gandalf the White, well, he's supposed to replace Saruman, who has become corrupt as the head of their order. So he becomes what Saruman was supposed to be, and dons robes of pure white. But does Gandalf always look like a wizened old man? Or is that just the form the Maiar took on to help guide the good folks of Middle-earth against Sauron? Let's find out.
Show yourself!
Can Gandalf shapeshift? Well, given that he has walked amongst the elves, dressed as an elf, and can gather clouds of darkness around him when looking like one of the big folk, we're certain the answer is yes. The Maiar are supposed to be formless, unless they use their shapeshifting abilities in hate or mockery. Sauron did that and was thus condemned forever to be stuck in his Dark Lord form. Want to know about the other forms he had? Because we have a video on that. And yes, one of his many forms is a werewolf. Does that mean Gandalf's use of his power is undisputed? Of course not. There is fan discourse on what allows Gandalf to change his shape, how it is different from Sauron, and more. And we do see two forms of the being the elves call Mithrandir, Gandalf the Grey and Gandalf the White. Grey versus White, the Gandalf comparison. Other than appearance, Gandalf the Grey and Gandalf the White have significant differences in terms of power. While it cost him his humor and made him more cautious, that just made sense. After all, he was the only one of his order who was actually fulfilling the task assigned to the Istari, making him the Valar's sole emissary to Middle-earth. How? Saruman fell. The blue wizards were lost. The brown wizard, while on the right path, cared more for the forests of Mirkwood than the free people of Middle-earth, and that left Gandalf the Grey in his battered form, hiding his true power until he sacrificed himself to defeat the Balrog of Khazad-dûm, and had a historic transformation when being healed in Lothlorien, where he became the most powerful wizard in Middle-earth, renamed Gandalf the White, with a white staff to match. He was now given the authority to punish Saruman for straying and allowing the One Ring to corrupt him, which we see in the Two Towers. Fans love the tidbit that Gandalf couldn't hold his smoke after the transformation, which seems to have been an act of divinity by the creator god Eru Ilúvatar himself. From his kindness to his power, everything about Gandalf seemed to have grown in the sense that Gandalf the White displayed more power, but we cannot say for sure whether he got an upgrade or was just more open with the powers he had even as Greyhaim. He was kinder but also harsher, and his power did not need guidance or cajoling. Now he could break evil with his mere words, like he did for Theoden King. Okay, we've mentioned that Gandalf went up a few power levels when Eru apparently transformed him into the White, but how powerful is Mithrandir? Well, some say that he has the power of the sun. Well, we know he's telepathic, telekinetic, and his voice has power. As shown by his Shire-famous fireworks, he can create smoke and fire. Being a wizard, it's given that he can do magic, and like most beings of Middle-earth, he can ride horses and fight with a sword. Yet when it comes to his ability to wield the Flame of Anor, we're never quite sure if it was a trick to scare the Balrog, known as Durin's Bane, or if the old wizard truly has that power. What do you think, fans? Can Gandalf control the sun of Middle-earth? He could probably hold a Silmaril with pure intent, but that's just speculation on our part. Now, we want to help you understand why, despite being so powerful, Gandalf never does huge feats of magic, except maybe breaking Theoden King out of his trance that kept him gullible to Wormtongue's nonsense. Even if some say his greatest power is his precaution and wisdom, there must be something more than that, right? Why does Gandalf never use his full strength in magic? Well, Gandalf, as a wizard, did not seem to have all the powers he would in his formless existence as a Maiar. Despite this, we've established he was a powerhouse, especially when he became Gandalf the White. So why does he keep checks on his power? Why not summon an army of moths? Because he saw the likes of Sauron and Saruman, who fell prey to the lust for power. The central theme of The Lord of the Rings is that power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. While Gandalf trusted himself not to abuse the power of the elven ring he wore, he never gave himself the same benefit with the One Ring. And for good reason. He knew he wasn't infallible, and that with his powers, the ring would be more dangerous than ever. Gandalf, in trust, understood what Uncle Ben said, that with great power comes great responsibility, and to stay true to his task, he responsibly chose to guide the free people of Middle-earth, instead of using his massive power to lead them, like Sauron wanted to. Which, as Stephen Colbert noted, makes sense given that one of his patrons is Nienna, the goddess who weeps perpetually to turn grief into wisdom. She probably instilled in Gandalf the importance of prudence, caution, and good company. Like Bilbo Baggins said, if more of us valued good cheer, boy does Gandalf get that. It's the smallest people who give him the most courage, and it is them whom he must defend. How can someone be this wise? Well, while not everyone matures with age, Gandalf appears to have. How old is he again? Is it 900 years old like the Doctor, or older? Why don't we open our copies of The Lord of the Rings and take a gander?
Lady Galadriel,
Mithrandir.
I Minguistantifanis.
Gandalf's age, a mystery? Well, Gandalf, like all the other Maiar and Valar, was created by the Great Music, which led to the creation of Middle-earth, elves, men, and more. After that, there were 2 ages that passed before Olorin was sent to Middle-earth as the Grey Wizard, and there he stayed for an age that lasted around 3,000 years. While we do not have an estimate of how long the first age was, the second was again over 3,000 years, setting Gandalf's age to be at least 6,000 years at the end of the events of the Return of the King. But some writers have cited that he was at least 1,000 before Frodo set off with the One Ring. In Legolas, a character guide, they estimate Gandalf to be 10,000 years old. Yet we can all agree it is likely that the immortal being is much older, and will remain so since he's now in the Undying Land. So yes, the Wandering Wizard's age is like him, a mystery wrapped up in the guise of an old man. Mentor characters, I tell you. So we know he's old, wise, and powerful, but have we really jumped into the depths of his powers? Maybe we can explore some abilities, like his...
Yes.
telepathic abilities. While the movie cannot show this in clarity, according to some, the books have done a good job showing how Gandalf can manipulate objects and the world around him with his thoughts. With just a hand movement, he too can tell you that these are not the droids you're looking for, or steal your weapons, as shown in the following passage. He lifted up his hand, and in the very stroke, the sword of Denethor flew up and left his grasp, and fell behind him in the shadows of the house. And Denethor stepped backward before Gandalf as one amazed. Fans and critics, such as Stephen Colbert, have noted that the Maiar Maiar and Valar are based on Greek gods, whose magic comes from a connection to nature, and one of the best feats of such a display was the Gandalf vs. Saruman showdown, where with just his words, Gandalf breaks Saruman's staff. Though that didn't show much or any of his telepathic abilities in the movies, now did it? No, those he shows when he reads Frodo's mind. Perhaps that is why this one of the Istari is so wise. He can read minds, but his strategies employ more skills, such as the ability to get aid from Manwë's eagles. Yes, as shown in The Hobbit: An Unexpected Journey, Gandalf, just like his fellow Istari the Brown Wizard, can talk to animals, eagles, and moths.
The Grey Pilgrim. That's what they used to call me.
Gandalf can communicate with animals. Imagine this. The company of Thorin Oakenshield is stuck on a ledge. They're up in the trees that are being torn down by wargs, with no escape in sight. The king under the mountain, Thorin Oakenshield, has gone to engage the enemy, but he seems to be losing. Suddenly, Bilbo Baggins appears out of nowhere to defend him. His courage amazes the Dwaro, and they too join the fray as much as they can, before giant eagles drop out of the sky to aid them in battle. And not just once, but later too. As the Battle of the Five Armies draws to a close, the Eagles of Manwë arrive to assist the company. And when Bilbo's heir and nephew Frodo, along with his best friend Samwise, has managed to rid Arda of Sauron's One Ring, the Eagles arrive again to carry the duo to the safety of Rivendell. The common thread in all this? The Eagles of Manwë choosing to interfere with the events of Middle-earth. We know for sure, in the Hobbit movies, the first time they came was because Gandalf called them for aid. Another show of this power is when Gandalf can summon Shadowfax, his horse, with just a thought, which is also present in the books. Ooh, I love discussing powers. Shall we go to the fireworks now? Gandalf and fireworks. He can make smoke rings, fire at will, and even shoot lightning. In the Hobbit books, Gandalf is shown to make supernatural fire in shades of green and blue, which means it's extremely hot. When fighting the Nazgul, he uses bursts of light and has even called down lightning on goblins, showing that when it comes to manipulating the weather, he has some tricks up his sleeve. And can we take a moment to appreciate that fight with the Balrog? Like Saruman, Gandalf too can produce fire and even make glowing shields for his protection. I wonder who would win in a battle, Doctor Strange, or whoever the Sorcerer Supreme is in the Marvel Comics, or our favorite Maiar. If we were into betting fans, our money would be on Greyheim. And yes, that's another one of Gandalf's many names. Can you spot all the ones we've mentioned in this video? While you do that, we'll tell you about the weapons and outside powers Gandalf has at his disposal. Gandalf's staff. One object Gandalf is never seen without is his staff, which, when he was Gandalf Greyheim, he used as a walking staff to further sell the image of a kindly old man. Yet he also used it as a weapon to whack hobbits and to conjure fire. Of course, Gandalf the White gets an upgraded staff. If you're wondering what these two staffs look like, well, you're in luck. Greyheim's staff has been described by the prop makers for the movies to resemble an opening flower with elvish designs. And yes, this is the staff that Saruman takes away when he imprisons Gandalf before the Fellowship is formed. Thus, Gandalf was given a wooden staff with a removable crystal that dims or brightens at his command by Elrond. Lumos, anyone? While unlike the books, the staff survived the Bridge of Moria. It too breathed its last when the Balrog dragged our favorite Istari to the abyss. So what's up with Gandalf the White Staff? Well, it's not the staff Gandalf used to carve the magical rune into Bilbo's newly painted green door. We can't underestimate it either. It too has elvish designs, and a hollow reminding us of the OG staff, but also has a pyramid-like structure. This was, of course, given to the wizard by the Lady of Lothlorien, Galadriel. We have an entire video on her for those interested. While this staff helps him fight the Nazgul, the battle with the Witch King ends with it breaking as well. And so we see Gandalf on the ship to the Undying Lands with a similar but longer fourth staff. Yet his sword Glamdring and his staff aren't the only weapons in Gandalf's arsenal. There's also Narya, one of the 3 elven rings, given to Gandalf by the shipwright Círdan. This ring aligns perfectly with Gandalf's nature. It helps its wearer resist tyranny, which really must have upset Sauron's plan now that we think about it, and it can also resist domination and despair. Like all other rings of power, this ring, which could inspire people, also helped the wearer beat time-caused aging, and allowed them to hide from magic. Also, some sources have gathered that this ring was called the Ring of Fire, which means that if Gandalf was being truthful, Narya could be how he wields wields the Sun of Middle-earth. Now, the question is, where does Gandalf use the ring? To inspire before the final battle, of course. In a few other places, the ring has come out of its invisibility cloak, but that is the big moment where an entire city is inspired by it. You know, Gandalf is not the only Istari who stayed true to the reason the Order was sent to the Middle-earth, but he's also the only one to wield a ring of power. Not to mention, he becomes the leader of the group. Does that mean he's the strongest of them all? Let's find out, shall we, fans?
Your staff is broken.
Is Gandalf the strongest Istari in the Lord of the Rings franchise? So, fans unanimously agree that Gandalf is the most powerful of the Istari, despite both Saruman and Sauron having more power than Greyhaim. How? Well, he's certainly the fairest and the wisest, with skill enough in magic to battle a Balrog for days and destroy it, a feat that only the golden elf Glorfindel was able to do. And yes, Gandalf was allowed to return from the dead, in a way. He was also resurrected by Eru himself, or so it is speculated, which shows how important the character was to the victory of the Free People. But how does that tie into power? Well, Sauron could create Balrogs and the One Ring, which makes him the most powerful wizard, but he was never part of the Istari. And while he might have used more magic than Olorin did, Olorin's wisdom and people skills, or rather hobbit skills, were the doom of Sauron. As for Saruman, while he was the original leader of the Order of the Wizards in Middle-earth, he was corruptible, while Gandalf stayed true. Not only that, but Gandalf the White defeated Saruman and broke his staff with mere words, showing that in terms of power alone, fans are right with their unanimous vote. Gandalf the White is the most powerful Istari in Middle-earth. So is it now time to bid adieu to the character? Do we know everything we can about him? Well, there's a little left, because while we know Gandalf as a mentor to Frodo and Bilbo, as a leader for Aragorn, and in other such roles, the Istari's personal life seems to be a point of interest to the fandom. Yes, we're talking about whether...
You're leaving. Yes.
Gandalf had any love interests. Gather your cups of water and tea, my dear viewers. For now, we enter the bowels of gossip in Middle-earth, though doing so about Gandalf feels like a crime. Is it just us? While there's absolutely no bookish evidence to support this sacrilegious idea, some fans have taken to the idea that Gandalf had a thing for Galadriel, who, need we remind you, is already married to the Lord of Lothlorien. Yes, she heals Gandalf, and yes, the two are important members of the White Council, and yes, they have a deep bond. But why does it have to be romantic? After all, The Lord of the Rings is an epic tale that shows us various deep bonds outside of romance. Sam and Frodo, Merry and Pippin, Aragorn and Legolas, to name a few. So if there's no evidence, why do fans ship the two characters? Is there subtext perhaps? Okay, so this is not one of the instances where a majority of the fandom agrees that two characters have subtext. Fans are almost vehemently against the Galadriel-Gandalf romance for various reasons, including Gandalf being a formless angelic entity who was supposed to protect Galadriel's kind. Even if that is ignored, there's the reason that fans simply don't see this pair as a romantic couple. Except for the team who wrote the Hobbit movies, who implied a deeper connection, bordering on romantic between the characters. While many fans took to the romantic subtext they provided for Thorin and Bilbo, even though there's a sizable portion of the fandom that does not support this pairing, most hated the idea of Gandalf with anyone, especially Galadriel. Not because the character is bad, but because of the reasons we've already listed. We need more characters that are just great friends or work together. Now we have an interesting question for you before we end. We know Gandalf is immortal, but how immortal is he?
Fly, you fools!
Can Gandalf die? Yes, Gandalf can die, as evidenced by his fight with the Balrog. But does that mean he's like the elves, or are Maiar different in terms of dying in a fight, but being immortal otherwise? While that remains a topic for another detailed video, it does remind us that even these creatures who can survive until the end of the world and into its remaking are fallible in The Lord of the Rings. This also makes Saruman's death all the more anticlimactic. No wonder Sauron felt the need to bind his soul to a ring, to ensure that if his physical body died, he would not lose his formless spirit. But here's the question. Do the physical bodies taken on by the Maiar age? In Gandalf's case, some have theorized that they don't. After all, while almost 60 years passed between the reclaiming of Erebor in The Hobbit and the events of The Lord of the Rings, the character didn't seem much changed. But this seems to hold untrue, for there is canon evidence that Gandalf's body bent from age, and that wandering for 2,000 years on foot did change his physical form. This means that while he's immortal, his body ages in a way that makes him different from elves, men, hobbits, and dwarves in terms of lifespan and aging. Does this mean that if Sauron had taken longer to return to Middle-earth, he would have faced Olorin in a different body? Who knows? Let us know what you think in the comments. Well, now that we've got that out of the way, let us pave the path for the final bit. Yes, we present to you A marvelous review. So what do we have to say about Gandalf? Well, there's a lot, as evident in this video. Now that we've reached the end, we're lost for words. After all, how do you summarize the existence of an immortal being, inhabiting a mortal form, but whose formless true self has been alive since before the creation of physical reality, and will continue to exist until the end and remaking of the universe? I suppose we boil it down to what Gandalf was truly about: caution, wisdom, and action. These are all words that describe this mentor character in Tolkien's universe. Like all mentors, he was there to guide Frodo, and perhaps even Bilbo, helping them grow into who the world needs them to be. He draws strength from those often ignored, and protects those he calls his own, most notably the hobbits. But above all, he's true to his duty as one of the Istari, putting into play various ploys and schemes to rid the world of evil, placing his faith in the goodness of the free peoples and in his own counsel. While sometimes this fails, like it initially seemed to with Thorin Oakenshield, other times it shines, as it did with the Bagginses and eventually the Dwarves of Erebor. A character who spends his time in both research and adventure, Gandalf is the epitome of kindness and forethought, making him a worthy student of the Valar he was closest to, Nienna. And that's a wrap, folks. Which character should we cover next? If you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one and be safe. Thanks, everyone.